This is USVI News, your Virgin Islands connection.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for USVI News. I'm Emily Matson. Police and elected officials say they had a robust discussion Monday with President Joe Biden on gun violence. The president's pushing more communities to use federal pandemic relief funds for policing and crime prevention, including the territory of the USVI. And it comes as the U.S. grapples with a surge in violent crime in some cities.
Folks, I want to start.
Several top city leaders and police chiefs from across the country joined the president and attorney general at the White House to discuss ways to reduce gun violence and crime.
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. We know there are some things that work.
The American Rescue Plan provided around $350 billion to cities and states to help hire and train more police officers. Last month, President Biden laid out his plan to combat gun violence. It includes stemming the flow of illegal firearms and expanding summer programs and job opportunities for teens and young adults.
And this is going to help prevent crime and support young people to pick up a paycheck instead of a pistol.
In a study of 24 major cities, homicides increased by 24% in the first quarter of 2021 compared with the same period last year, and by 49% that time period in 2019.
We can't continue to respond to symptoms. It's time to respond to the underlying causes of violence in our city.
The president has also called on Congress to pass gun violence legislation after high-profile mass shootings earlier this year at a Boulder, Colorado supermarket and 3 Atlanta area spas. And VI Governor Albert Bryan Jr. escalates USVI crime-fighting strategies after the president said COVID funds could be used to end gun violence. As just mentioned, President Biden called to use federal COVID-19 relief funds to fight the national epidemic of gun violence, providing the Virgin Islands with an unprecedented opportunity to make significant inroads in curbing violent crime. Governor Bryan said recently the funding will allow them to purchase more equipment, hire more officers, and add more cameras to the territory's growing surveillance network in order to help stop the violent crime plaguing our community. Government House also plans to use these resources to purchase additional scanning equipment at our territory's ports. The Biden administration says the territory can use its share of direct aid to hire police officers, prosecute gun traffickers, and get new technology to respond to gun violence. Crime has risen dramatically across the nation since the start of the pandemic, and despite a seemingly spike in violent crime here, according to VI police stats, the territory had fewer violent crimes and more arrests in 2019 and 2020 compared to the same period in 2017 and 2018. So let's take a look at the statistics from this past year so far. There were 3,119 violent crimes with 608 arrests in 2019 and 2020 compared with 4,324 violent crimes, 524 arrests in 2017-2018. Now, in those same time frames, VIPD seized 375 firearms in 2019-2020 versus 256 that police seized in 2017-2018. In the last 4 years, there were 192 homicides in the territory, resulting in 55 arrests. Thanks to a generous donation, the Virgin Islands Police Department has several new four-legged members on the force. The Virgin Islands Police Department is happy to announce the revitalization of the Canine Corps in the St. Thomas St. John district. It's all thanks to a generous donation by Southland Gaming. Back in April, executives from Southland Gaming presented a donation of $43,000 to the VIPD to increase the canine capacity in the district, in turn enhancing the VIPD's mission of crime fighting across the territory. This is a picture from earlier this week when leaders of Southland Gaming visited police headquarters to meet with VIPD brass, along with the officers of the department's Canine Corps and the new police dogs. Police leaders say this donation is a clear indication that Southland Gaming supports not only the men and women of the VIPD, but the community as a whole. And now on to the latest on the revival of the cruise industry. Cruises to the Caribbean and here to the Virgin Islands set sail once again just recently. Now the Port of Seattle is preparing for cruises to start back later this month. Last week, 30 Royal Caribbean employees set sail for a test cruise to Alaska.
Cruise ships have long sat empty since the early days of the pandemic when onboard outbreaks stranded passengers and crews scrambled for ports to accept them. Now the industry is setting sail once again.
We're thrilled to be back here in Seattle after such a long layoff, being the very first cruise ship and the very first cruise brand to sail to Alaska from our home port of Seattle.
Mark Tamas of Royal Caribbean is here for the simulation voyage, vaccinated employees standing in for vacationing customers on a short Alaskan cruise. This is the second such test after the first out of Miami.
And what they're doing is they're helping us bring our protocols that we've been working on for a long time, for almost a year and a half, to life and make small adjustments.
All that with observers from the CDC on board. They'll even simulate having a sick guest. The return of cruises means big money for Seattle. Before the pandemic, the industry brought in almost $1 billion for the local economy.
We're really looking forward to this. This simulated cruise will give them a lot of information, and same with the Port of Seattle.
The first real cruise leaves Seattle July 19th. Passengers may not notice some of the changes, like expanded medical facilities, onboard testing, and better ventilation. Others will be more apparent, like a shift away from self-serve buffets. Still, operators could have some work to do, convincing people to get back on board after some of the horrifying scenarios from the start of the pandemic.
The most important thing is making sure our guests feel safe, because that really is going to give them this comfort level to relax and have a great vacation like they really want to do.
In the British Virgin Islands, there's been a significant spike recently in COVID-19 cases, specifically on Tortola. So in an effort to protect visitors and residents of the BVI officials have decided to delay the reopening of seaports to foreign private pleasure boats until the territory gets the virus under control. An official reopening date of the seaports has not yet been announced. Now to the latest on the rare protests happening now in Cuba. Thousands of Cubans are taking to the streets on the island, protesting over a lack of freedoms and a worsening economy. Isabel Rosales explains the significance of this moment and how the White House is responding.
Shouts demanding freedom. Anti-government protests erupting across Cuba at a never-before-seen level in the country's 62-year-long communist regime. Protesters defying government authority, sick of power outages, scarce medicine and food, the repression of political activists. The economy is deeply damaged, and COVID-19 deaths are skyrocketing. Officers arrested some protesters, but could not contain the crowds. President Miguel Díaz-Canel denouncing protesters, blaming its woes on the U.S. and its sanctions on the island.
Yesterday's protests weren't peaceful. There was vandalism. They stoned the police force, damaged cars, a behavior that's completely vulgar, completely indecent.
Díaz-Canel calling on the army and communist supporters to confront demonstrators.
The United States stands firmly with the people of Cuba as they assert their universal rights, and we call on the government of Cuba to refrain from violence or attempts to silence the voice of the people of Cuba.
Florida's large Cuban-American community holding protests in solidarity on Sunday.
In Cuba, our nation is in the streets demanding human rights, demanding the end of the dictatorship. And the people of Cuba in Miami is accompanying that momentum.
90 miles away in Cuba, continued chants of the anti-communism anthem, Patria y Vida, Homeland and Life. Isabel Rosales reporting.